Oh, seriously? I think we're starting again.
Can I say admit all?
Not yet.
Okay,
No,
not yet.
not yet. Not yet. Hold on.
No problem.
I'm not sure what's happening right now. Oh, we're live. Okay, admit all. Good evening. There we go. Good evening and welcome everybody to Northern Kentucky History Hour. I'm Tara Johnson-Noem, your host for tonight. We're just going to pause a minute to let everyone in and then we will get started. Thank you so much for joining us. If you're just joining us, this is Northern Kentucky History Hour. We're just going to wait about half a minute or so and let everybody else in, and then we'll be right with you. Okay. All right, everyone. Good evening and welcome to Northern Kentucky History Hour, a project of Behringer-Crawford Museum. As I said earlier, my name is Tara Johnson-Noem and I am your host for this evening. We are so glad that you are with us. Let's see, what should I tell you tonight? Behringer-Crawford Museum is an amazing organization and I am so proud to be a member of the Board of Trustees. I see a number of my fellow board members logging on this evening, and so to them, I say thank you for your support of this project. I see some staff members, I think, as well, and we could not do this without the support of the staff of the museum, so thank you to them. And thank you so much to all of our supporters. The museum is financially supported in part by the City of Covington, the Kenton County Fiscal Court, ArtsWave, the Kentucky Arts Council, the Northern Kentucky Sports Hall of Fame, and the Carol Ann and Ralph V. Hale Jr. U.S. Bank Foundation. Behringer-Crawford is also supported by our members, and I know many of you are already members, and so I want to say thank you so much for supporting the museum in that way, especially in this very trying time. We really appreciate your support. If you're not already a member, please consider becoming one. You can go to bcmuseum.org and you can learn more. So please do that if you have a chance. The other thing that you can do is you can go to Facebook and you can learn more about all the online virtual programming we have during the holiday season. While we are, unfortunately, the museum is closed to the public in person, but there are so many resources available online at the website and on Facebook, including the curators chats. If you haven't had a chance to check out Jason French, our curator of collections, does regular curators chats highlighting special artifacts that are at the museum, historic places throughout Northern Kentucky. He does a phenomenal job, and they're little snippets. They might be 5 minutes, they might be 10, very digestible if you just need a dose of history in your day. So definitely encourage you to do that. Just a few reminders as we get going. Everyone will stay muted during the presentation, but that doesn't mean that we don't want you to be involved. If you have a question or if you want to make a comment about what's going on, we really encourage you to make a note in the chat, and I'll watch all the questions and ask them at the end. Also, we will have, back by popular demand, our quiz. So there will be a moment in the presentation where Jeannine will talk about the quiz question. So, get ready to type. It can be quite competitive. And then the winner, other than bragging rights, also will receive by mail a button from Northern Kentucky History Hour, which we love. So, whoops, looks like Jeannine Kreinbrink got lost. There, we're bringing her back now. So definitely think about trying to answer the quiz question, but no Googling. You have to know already. So let's check in with Jeannine and make sure she's with us, and then I will go ahead. Yes, she's here. Okay, great. And I will go ahead and introduce her. Miss Jeannine Kreinbrink has been a regular guest on Northern Kentucky History Hour for the last 6 months. We've had her on several times to talk about archaeology and history in Northern Kentucky. She is the president and senior partner at KV Cultural Resources Management, LLC, which she co-founded with Doug Van Stroh in 2011. She has combined a career in cultural resource management with conducting educational and public programs in archaeology, preservation, and history. Her archaeology career began at NKU and in volunteering at Behringer-Crawford Museum, where she has been associate archaeologist since 1981. She began a full-time career in archaeology in 1986, working on urban archaeology in Covington, and that's what we're going to hear about tonight. Jeannine obtained her master's in 1992 from UC, where she wrote her master's thesis on the archaeological sites that were first excavated by Ellis Crawford when he was Behringer-Crawford Museum's director. Jeannine helped found and has served on the board of the James A. Ramage Civil War Museum since its opening in 2005. She serves on the board of directors for Friends of Big Bone, and for many years, she also taught as adjunct professor to the anthropology and history departments at NKU. Born and raised in Ellesmere, Jeannine has lived in South Carolina and Ohio. She and her husband Anthony built an earth-sheltered house in Boone County in 1994 and have lived there since then. Their daughter and her family live in Austin, Texas. So happy to have you with us again tonight. All right, I'm going to hit mute, everybody. Let's see. And then Jeannine, if you want to go ahead.
Here we go. Now you can hear me, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so let me go down here and share my screen. Host disabled participant screen sharing.
Oh, that's because you left. Hold on one second. Let me, so sorry about
We
that.
can fix that. No, my computer had a little blip there and
Yeah, we
So I
can
tried to shut it
absolutely
down.
fix that. Okay, now you should be,
Yep.
now, actually now.
Right now?
Yeah.
There we go. Okay. All right, can you see? I can't see it.
Yeah, we see it kind of a little small, like you might want to hit
Hold on.
the full screen.
Yeah, I'm trying to. Hold on. Some other stuff popped up in between. There we go. So you can see it now?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So as I had said in the description, if you wanted to see what it looks like from the bottom of a privy, that's what the picture on the right is. I did not take that picture. I'm one of the people. I think that's me right there. From a long time ago, that was a crew and somebody was standing in the bottom taking the picture. Back when we were all young and stupid and thought we were safe in the bottom of an outhouse. All right. I've got a lot of slides I'm going to run through. I got a lot of fun stuff to talk about. The first thing I want to do is not exactly a definition, but some people say that anthropology and history are not about individuals. But in urban archaeology, we often have the privilege of finding compelling families and stories associated with houses and house lots that would otherwise lay hidden. And these are some scenes from several Covington urban archaeology digs that I've been involved with. This is Doug Bonstro, my work partner there I'm pointing to. And I think that's him right there too. The top picture, these are 10th Street, and this is over at 11th and Greenup. And we're going to talk a little bit about each of those areas this evening. And now what I'd like to do is scroll through some individual slides while I do a little bit of a historical context, get us all set up here. We're going to be talking about these areas this evening. Here is Robbins, 10th Street. Here's Greenup going north and south. Prospect over here, 11th Street. This is an image of when the Jacob Price homes were still there. The apartments opened 1939. We did some excavations here and also down here in the corner at 11th and Greenup. And at 3 locations over here on Robbins. And we're going to mostly be talking about 10th Street and down here at Site 155. All right. I love this photograph, and mostly because it's some of my ancestors. I'm not sure which one exactly. This was the Hartke family, and they lived over in the St. Joseph School, 10th, 11th, Green up in Scott area. And this gentleman right here looks like he just stepped off the boat, came from Eastern Europe. And I believe he was my great-great-grandfather, or at least a great-great-uncle. Still working on that. All right. What I wanted to say about this before I forget is that this was my neighborhood. All right. My family grew up in the neighborhood that we're going to be talking about. So it's been a fun number of years to work on these projects just because of that. All right. Covington had a very, very interesting residential settlement pattern in the urban core of the city throughout its history. On the surface, it was integrated residentially through the 19th century, with German and Irish immigrants living side by side as owners and tenants, often with African-American tenants or landowners in the same block. This residential pattern, however, is overlain by segregation. Hold on. By segregation in church attendance, schools, commercial establishments that they went to, and also in saloons. Many of the different institutions were socially segregated or religiously segregated. Even, for example, the Catholic Church in Covington, and for much of this period, the dominant religion in town, had separate churches, often in the same neighborhood, for German and English-speaking families. Euro-American settlers reached Covington in Kenton County in the 1790s, with many more in the early 19th century. The town of Covington was created in 1815, and their charter as a city was granted in 1834 and was continuing to grow through this entire time. This is the 11th Street Market in the summer of 1895. The economy flourished in Covington after the Civil War, with brewing and distilling and manufacturing as the basis for the economy. Common local industries included brick making, pottery, rope walks, where they made rope, beer brewing, glass factory, mineral water bottlers, and ironworks. The iron and steel industries were very important to Covington industrial development. Steel mills, rolling mills, and ironworks lined the Licking River on both the Kenton and the Campbell sides, and also down on the Ohio River as well. Many of the occupants in the east side of Covington, the 10th to 12th Street neighborhood, worked in one or more of these industries. For example, a man named John Bush owned multiple lots on 10th Street in the 1850s. He also owned a steel mill, and he built many of these small houses for his employees to live in, or at least to rent from. Nope, another family picture. This is my great-grandfather with the red arrow, and this man is named Joseph Volpenheim, and they were stonemasons, although I'm not really sure why they're all holding brooms and mops, except for the guy with the wine bottle up here, and the dog. But they were all master stonemasons in the early 20th century in Covington. Irish and German immigrants made up the majority of the population on the east side of Covington, although it was a mixed community with a growing African-American population by late in the century. In 1790, for example, 14% of Kentuckians overall were of German descent. These early settlers had arrived by land after first settling in Pennsylvania, Virginia, and the Carolinas. By the mid-19th century, most German immigrants came directly from the East Coast, down the Ohio River, or across land into Cincinnati and northern Kentucky. They arrived after the 1830s, especially after 1848, with revolutions in Europe. Oops. This is a picture of St. Joseph's School students, years unknown. It's from the library Spaces and Places. Many German immigrants to Covington included single men escaping from European military duty and young families traveling together. Some were farmers and headed for rural areas, but most of them were working class and included skilled craftsmen as carpenters, many unskilled working class laborers, and many of them moved into urban areas such as Covington, first as tenants and boarders, and then buying homes when they could afford them. The Germans who migrated to Covington were mainly from the Catholic parts of Germany, although Lutherans and other Protestant congregational members also arrived. The German Catholic immigrants convinced the local Covington diocese to build separate churches for the German immigrants by the mid-19th century. Mother of God Church was one of these, and St. Joseph Church near 11th and Scott was also a German church, so to speak. St. Mary's Church, which later became the cathedral, was an English-speaking church. Now, this is not a local picture, but it's a great immigrant picture. Other European immigrants to Kentucky were Irish or Scots-Irish. We're going to talk a little bit later, though, about Eastern European and Russian immigrants that were living in our neighborhood. Many were Protestant, such as Presbyterians. Many of them became leaders in Covington in the early decades of the 19th century. Later waves of Irish immigrants were mostly Catholic and arrived throughout the 19th century, fleeing the Great Famine in the 1840s, and then later famines also in the 1870s and 1880s. Many of these Irish immigrants, as Dr. Paul Tenkate has found out, came as single men and women sent by their families who could only afford one passage at a time, and they would work and send money back home or until they could afford to bring other people. This is a picture of one of the houses that was in the neighborhood at 11th and Greenup. The first African-American residents of Covington arrived as enslaved persons. Very few Northern Kentuckians owned slaves. They accounted for only about 2% of Covington's population prior to the Civil War. Free African-Americans did reside in Covington in the pre-Civil War era, but they were few in number and little is known of their experiences or how they came to be free. 1850, for example, there were 281 enslaved persons and 36 free persons of color living in Covington. In 1860, the free population had increased to 76, and the enslaved population had decreased. The residential pattern for free blacks in Covington through the 19th century is very interesting. It was very dispersed based on census records and city directories when we can tease that information out. They were pretty much spread evenly through the existing wards of Covington. In 1860s and 1870s, the population of Covington grew from about 16,000 to over 29,000 by 1880, due in large part to the Irish and German immigrants. However, the African-American population rose by a large amount, mainly because of people coming into the city looking for work. By 1880, there were over 1,900 African-American residents of Covington. Much of the research that's been done on the demographics in Covington has found that they were pretty much dispersed into all the residential neighborhoods, many living in the same block, as we'll see in a few minutes. Everybody, of course, was looking for affordable housing. Many local developers in the East Covington neighborhood and other parts of Covington bought groups of lots and constructed 1- or 2-story frame houses. This brick house that you see here was built a little bit later on Greenup Street in the 1860s. Here is a picture of the faculty of the Lincoln Grant School. The shift from residential integration to segregation began to change after 1900 with an increased influx of working class African Americans and Appalachian folk looking for work in the local steel plants, railroads, and other industries. The shift east of Greenup and between 7th and 12th Street to a majority African American neighborhood began as a combination of factors that were operating through the same time frame. By the early 20th century, the neighborhood was aging as many of the houses had been built before 1870. The German and Irish immigration had largely ended, and many second and third generation families were moving south in Covington, south of 15th Street, and on into Latonia and out into Fort Mitchell. The 7th Street Grade School for African American students had opened in 1880, and Lincoln Grant High School in the 1890s. Prominent African Americans in Covington, such as Jacob Price, lived on the East Side neighborhood in the late 19th, early 20th century. Jacob Price and others helped African American residents to purchase homes and to start businesses. And many of these were in the neighborhood that we're going to be talking about. Oh, here's a question. Covington Housing Authority built the Jacob Price homes in the late 1930s, and the low-income apartment complex opened in 1939. It housed a mostly African-American community. And it's a very interesting, complicated, we don't have a lot of time. We do a whole separate thing on Jacob Price homes, but when they built Jacob Price, they displaced the middle-class African-American community in this neighborhood. Many had begun to buy their own homes, and they'd started businesses. And although most of the buildings were old and in need of repair, and so they bought up over 150 homes, and then built Jacob Price. So here's our trivia question. Jacob Price Homes was named for Jacob Price, a well-known local African-American who had moved to Covington as a free man in 1859, and he died in 1923. He helped many people over the decades. He had two professions. What were they? If you can name one or both of them by the end of the slideshow, when we will answer that question. All right, so now we're going to jump to some maps. So the first part of the presentation is going to be on this neighborhood. Here's 10th Street and Robbins and Greenup and Prospect, and we're going to mostly be talking about this one right here, Site 171 on 10th Street. And now I have a series of maps. This is the 1877 Covington Atlas, and if you are interested in looking at this entire map, it is on the Covington Library's website. You can access it online. And you can see here, there's a series, these are their lot numbers in the subdivision. So we have 123 through 131 or 122. We're going to be talking about 127, 128, 129, and 130. You can see by 1877, they already had houses on them. That's what these indicate. This is the 1886 Sanborn fire insurance maps. These are also available for all of Kentucky online at the library, Kenton County Library. So now we can look at our lots again. We've added a house on lot 131. Here's our little house on 130. And here are other houses. And they're kind of built some close to the street and some sitting a little further back. The 1886 Atlas helps us some because it's starting to give us outbuildings. All these little rows of buildings across the back of the lot are outhouses. So that's 1886. We're going to move up here to 1894. And if you'll notice, the house in lot 130 is gone. And our other houses are still there. It's still showing us some of the different outbuildings in the back of the lots. And here's 1909. This one actually says outhouse right here. So these are our lots here that we're going to be talking about in more detail. And so what we usually do when we get a project like this, and we're going to go out and try to figure out what to look for, is we kind of combined all of those maps. So the different colors show you what was on the different maps. So here we had our house that's gone after by 1894, and all the little outbuildings and when they show up on the different maps. And this is a map that shows what we found when we went out looking to begin with. So all the yellow are features we did not excavate. Some of these are house foundations. Green ones are privies that we excavated. And then we also excavated all of these outhouses at the backs of the lots. And I don't have time to go into the complicated compromises and negotiations that go on, because we did not excavate, for example, these lots, but we did these four. And part of the reasoning was we didn't want to just do one outhouse on a lot. We wanted to do an entire lot, so we could see from beginning to end in the time chronology on these lots. And we'll run through real quick what we found, get to see some of the privies and things. This is lot 127. It had two brick privies across the back and a stone lined one. This was a little wood lined one, and this probably had been outhouses, but it had been dug out maybe when they took the house down. And this was a cistern. And here you can see a brick one excavated and in progress. Here are some of the other ones. Here's the stone lined one in progress, and then near the bottom. And you'll see the big scrape marks. We dig these with very large track hoes because with OSHA requirements and safety, we don't go down in them anymore like we did back in 1986, like the slide from the very beginning. And here's one of the brick ones. This is 128. We had a wood line, two wood line ones and a brick on the back, and a little tiny, we're not sure what that one was. Here's some of the one with the wood. You can still see the wood on it. And here's some wood there. This is 128, big, very large brick line. This is 20 feet deep from where my arrow is to the bottom. And this may be the one we had to stop on because the trackhoe couldn't reach any deeper. So it was very, very deep. There's lot 129, another deep one there. Beautiful piece of scroll flask that was found there. This one just had the one back here in the back. Lot 130, 131 had been really disturbed. That's a cistern. 130 is a very interesting lot. We're going to come back and talk about lot 130 again. These are all little privies. These are two little wood ones. These three are actually barrels. That's why they're round. They dug a hole and they actually put a barrel into the ground to serve as their outhouse. And we're going to talk about why this one might not, why it didn't have a larger brick one or stone one on the back here shortly. These are just some examples of what the lots look like as we're scraping them off and hitting the tops of some of these features. And here are the excavated ones. There's the square ones, and then you can still see the barrel on this one. The three round ones in lot 130. And then here are all the lots lined up one after the other. So we have three big privies at the back of this one, two at the back of this one at the back of this one, and 130 only has these very small ones, and most of them are up in the middle of the yard. They're not even at the back of the yard. And then these are just overview shots of the lots. Get myself caught up on here. All right. So we're looking at four different types of privies. We have barrels, wood lined, stone lined, and brick. And it's really kind of interesting. On 10th Street, we had multiple barrel privies. There were all the small privies in the other lots were barrels. And it was kind of interesting because it turned out that living on 10th Street we had at least 2 coopers. So these were men who actually built privies. A man named John Kirkpatrick, who owned lot 127, and members of the O'Donnell family all made barrels. So it's possible that they were selling or installing these barrel privies for their neighbors in their backyards. All right. So lot 130 is kind of interesting. We'll compare lot 130, for example, to lot 127 here. People have been doing some studies lately on whether the type of privy and the quality of the privy has anything to do with the economic situation of the landowner. And one of the things that we've been arguing is that it probably has a lot more to do with who, if you're living on the property you own, or if you are an absentee landlord, or possibly we could call them slumlords. So the owners of lot 130, and I'll have the deed history here in a little while. Let me see if I have it. There we go. So here's the lot 130 land ownership. So we go down to the bottom is the older stuff here. So we have George and Mary Tarvin and William Hunnell and R.C. McCracken and H.F. Bowen. They are all developers. They all bought lots and built houses on them. And then they sold it 1872 to W.H. and L.C. Allen, and they sold it to a man named Shine. And then Bartholomew Shine ended up with it. Anyway, it changes hands. The house is gone by certainly in the middle of Shine's ownership after 1892. It's gone by 1894. So none of these people lived on this lot. They were strictly an absentee landlord. In fact, Allen's lived in Cincinnati, and I think Shine did as well. So let's see who was actually living in lot 130. Well, 1865 to 1872, which is doing Bowen's ownership. 1869 and 1870, a man named Martin Nolan, who was Irish, had a son who was a plumber, and they lived there. And he is listed as having no occupation. So it looks like their children were supporting them. And there's no occupant in 1874, and the directories are missing until 1880. And in 1880, we have an African-American family living there. Jerry and Maria Page and Frank Page, and then some of their children and wards, or probably grandchildren, are living there with them. And he worked at the rolling mill. 1886, we have James MacArthur, who is a shoemaker and is of Irish descent, is living there. And there are no occupants living there after 1886. So the question then, we go back to the slide, is who put the privies in, and why isn't there a big one across the back? Well, if this is strictly a rental, the landowner, the absentee landowner, has no incentive to pay somebody to dig a stone or brick line privy in the back. These other lots all started with the small privies. Over here you can see these are barrel privies. But as soon as the first 10 years of lot 127, it was rented. And then when the landowners bought it, they put in the brick and stone privies. So as soon as somebody bought it who was going to live there, they invested in the more expensive outhouse. So it's kind of an interesting thing about absentee slumlords in Covington, and what we can maybe figure out from that. All right, so if we compare the 4 lots, because we know lot 130 was all rental, right? It's all renters. And when I was talking about the neighborhoods are residentially integrated through time and in the same neighborhood, we have in lot 127, we have an African-American renter, and then a German renter, and then Irish owners, German owners, African-American owners, Scots renters, Irish owners, and then African-American after 1920. Irish, German, a German and Irish married couple, and then Irish and African American and Irish. So in 4 houses right next to each other, we have most of the demographic of Covington. So it's very, very interesting. The bottom of the slide are a few of the artifacts that we recovered. Our nice little polar bear here, a cup, chamber pot, and some nice bottles. We're going to talk about pharmacy stuff in a minute. A few other artifacts. We have some Catholic saints in the middle. Just some different canning jar, a jug. Somebody went to the World's Fair in London in 1851, or perhaps bought it after it was brought over here for sale. There's a pharmacy bottle. Lot 129, I just want to talk about really briefly because we had a city council member living there in 1880s. He won an award for trying to save a drowning child on the north side of the street. He died in 1885. In 1886, a renter at Lot 125 is a man named Daniel James, who was a carpenter, lived there with his wife, Judith. And in the outhouse in Lot 129, we found a USA buckle. This is the actual artifact. And this is what it was. It went on an ammunition case here. And he was a captain in Company D of the 93rd Indiana Infantry. And he was very active in the local Grand Army of the Republic. And was an officer at the James Garfield GAR post. And at some point, he lost his cartridge buckle in his outhouse. So very interesting. I'm going to run through all this real fast. We've got children, evidence that at all the lots, there were children resident living at all the lots. So you can see the list up here. We have lots of different toys, marbles, and we're going to talk about the dolls here in a minute. This is just the chart showing it. Lots of marbles, lots of doll heads. Now the fascinating thing, all of these doll heads came out of one outhouse, just one outhouse. And this isn't even all of them. This is a sample of the doll heads that came out of this outhouse. And we don't have any doll bodies. So there are no arms or legs, just heads. And so we're trying to figure out why this outhouse is full of doll heads. And so we made up a story, whether it's real or not, I can't prove it. But you see this little object over here on the left. These are animal bones, and someone has taken one, a small one, and put it into the larger one to make a hammer. And so the field crew came up with this theory that one of the little boys who lived on this lot was knocking all the heads off the little girl's dolls. And either he was throwing them in the outhouse or he got caught and they got thrown away in the outhouse. I think he was probably dumping them in there. It was fascinating. I mean, dozens of doll heads. If they were spread out, fine, but they're all in one privy, along with his hammer. And I'm guessing he got caught. And mom or dad probably threw that down in there with him. Anyway, so kind of interesting. All right, let's skip to 11th and Green up here while we got a few minutes. Here's Green up Street. Here's 11th Street. All of these are outhouses. These are outhouses, and this is an outhouse. These are cisterns here. And then, so we're going to run through. We're only going to really talk about this lot right here, which is 1048 Greenup Street. So this is working. There's 11th Street and Greenup Street over there. Here they are digging out a cistern. We don't usually do cisterns, but the state said we had to dig a cistern, so we did this big giant cistern. You can see how huge our track was. Here are the outhouses. This was a really little one back here. The brick outhouses at the back of lot 1048. And these were also very, very deep. This is about 20 feet deep here as well. Here it is in progress, getting dug out. So we're going to talk about 1048 Greenup Street, which this arrow was pointing to a picture of the house. They were not torn down until 1980. So the Western Baptist Theological Institute sold the property, the lot in 1849. These people did not build there, but Joseph Rusha, who bought it in 1853, was a builder, among other things. He also owned the 5 Mile House, which is now Barleycorns for a while. He bought it in 1853. His daughter got it when he died in 1907. So they owned the property from 1853 to really 1913, because the daughter sold it out of the family in 1913. And then a man named Ben Gessiness bought it in 1921, and then his wife Rose lived there as well. We'll come back to Mr. Gessiness here shortly. So this who owned the house. Well, the Rushas rented this, and this is the 1880 census, and we put this together from the census and directories. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 separate families living in this one house. So they had subdivided, it was 2 stories tall and with a couple of additions on the back. So they had subdivided it. So I'm guessing each family essentially got a room. And all the yellow highlighted ones are widows. And there's one at the bottom you can't see. There's a widow down here who got cut off the page. So there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 widows living here, a young couple, and various other working class families are living in this house. And you can see few of them have occupations. So we have a dressmaker, a cooper, paper carrier, and a glass packer, and a washerwoman, all living in this one house. And we found that almost every house, even the ones where the owners were living in the house, had boarders. So they were renting out the back room, the attic, a bed. Most of them didn't have spare rooms, but almost every one of them had boarders. And we're going to talk about the Siegels for a minute. And Ben Gessiness takes over as a shoe guy as well. But Harry Siegel owned a shoe store, and he had a renter named Stanislaus Prunczynski, who was Polish. And he came here in 1907, and they were Russian and Jewish. The Siegels were. And the outhouse, feature 32, and these pictures don't do it justice, because there were hundreds of shoes in this outhouse, hundreds. And you can see that they were actually repairing them. These are cut pieces from them working on the shoes. Hundreds of worn out shoes of all different sizes. And we took pictures of every one of them after we brought them out. Women's shoes, children's, is fascinating. And we also found this, which is a coin purse or a container with hinges and latches. This is a combination. There's 1 French coin and 1 Russian coin that are embossed onto this little coin purse. This was a fabric, this right here where my arrow is, the fabric didn't exist, but it latched, and so it had a little fabric coin purse in it. We took it to the Coins Plus out in Florence, and they said that the coins are from the 1890s, and each of them is about the size of a modern quarter. And their speculation was that this commemorated the Franco-Russian alliance that lasted from 1892 to 1917 and ended with the Russian Revolution. And so one of the, either Stanislaus or the Siegels, one of them probably brought it with them when they emigrated to the United States. And then they lost it into their outhouse at some point. So I got some other odds and ends of things to do. Well, here talk about for a minute. We got just a couple of minutes. We tracked all kinds of information. You know, we could do another whole one just on other stuff, but So most of the products that they were buying, whether it was ceramics, and the non-local makes up the majority of the ceramics because a lot of them were from England, but bottles with names on them, 63% are non-local. We've got 15% from Covington, 20% from Cincinnati, and one item from Newport, which was a pharmacy bottle, and two international ones. So artifacts from all over. The really, really interesting thing is there are no Southern marked artifacts. We have no bottles, no liquor bottles, no beer bottles, no water bottles, anything, even from Lexington. So we didn't find anything coming up from the South. It's all coming down from Chicago or Pittsburgh, down to Cincinnati. Now, patent versus prescription bottles. Patent bottles, today we call that over-the-counter medicine, right? Back then they called them patent medicines. Prescription bottles are the ones you get from the pharmacy. We have Hermanses here on the right, and Zwick here at the bottom. Zwick is very interesting, and we don't have time to go into a lot. Doug Von Stroh, my work partner, has been working on researching some of the different pharmacies. This is just a chart showing how many pharmacies there were in the different neighborhoods and along different streets like Scott versus Madison, and which ones increased and declined. And he found a direct correlation with streetcar lines as to whether the numbers of pharmacies decreased or increased. The ones on the streetcar lines increased when you get into the 20th century. Very interesting. So Zwick, a very interesting man, multiple pharmacies. He actually died in Germany. He was walking along the street and construction material fell on him, and he died while he was at a conference. But the very interesting part of this is the last part of this obituary, and it says that his customers were his friends, and the poorer classes found in him a benevolent patron. And one of the other studies that we did was what pharmacy bottles did we get out of all of our different outhouses? What were they? Covington pharmacies? Where were the pharmacies? How close were they? How far away? And what we found is that the people on 10th Street were not patronizing the two closest pharmacies. They were patronizing Zwick, and they were patronizing one or two other pharmacies that were a little bit further away. And we suspect that if you were poor, perhaps Zwick would give you credit and these other pharmacies would not. Or perhaps they didn't want to serve a certain clientele. If they were Irish, they might not want to serve German, or vice versa. But apparently Zwick was a person who would help out people who were in time of need. And the Zwick pharmacy bottles are in pretty much every privy. So lots of interesting stuff there. We have lots of other interesting stuff, but I will end with a horrible and revolting accident. Not the one on the right. That's not me, but someone down in the bottom of a privy from a long time ago, before we had to worry about OSHA. So I've included this particular example because the woman survives. There are multiple articles from Covington where they did not, but I wanted to end it with a positive note. So this poor woman, and this was on East 11th Street. So this is literally right across the street from our dig. And so she went out to the outhouse and the floor fell through and she went down into the privy. And so she's swimming down in the privy, and screams attracted the attention of the family, and they put a ladder down and they were able to catch her, and they had to wait until the fire department got there. And so they were able to rescue her out of the privy that she had fallen into. So that's a positive one. There are other ones not quite so positive. So I would like to thank Covington Housing Authority, HUD, Kentucky Heritage Council, Doug, of course, and our field and lab archaeologists that worked on these various projects. And I have my next slide. I'm not going to yet because that is the answer to the trivia question. So Tara, back to you.
Okay. Let's see here. Okay. Wow.
Has anybody speculated?
There has been a wide variety of speculation, Jeannine. So
shall we go to the answer?
I think we should, just because I'm actually kind of dying to know, and I normally look at the answers and then I kind of have a guess, but I don't have one this time.
He was a fascinating man. This is his mural on the flood wall. So there's one of the murals on the Covington flood wall is Jacob Price. There's no photograph of him that I know of. So someone put this up there, but he was a Baptist minister and a very successful lumberyard owner in Covington, and that allowed him to help many, many people in Covington. So that is the answer.
I have a question based on a couple of the responses. Did he have any role in the Underground Railroad?
Not that we know of. He didn't get to Covington until 1859. So if he did, I don't know. He was more known for his helping people, helping people start businesses, helping people get what they needed to live, working on educational. He was one of the ones who helped get the school going, the high school and everything down there in Covington. So he was very involved with all of that.
Awesome. Okay, so based on my review of the chat, it looks like Marcia Geraci and Tamra, I am going to give both of them our prize. Marcia Geraci was half right. She got lumberyard. And then Tamra was half right. She got Baptist minister. So we're going to give it to both of them for getting a portion of the answer. So congrats to you both. Thanks for playing our quiz to everybody who made a guess. We do have a question about where was the lumberyard?
4th or 5th in Madison.
Okay.
It was much
pretty far
closer.
north.
Yeah, but he lived on Prospect for a while, right at 10th and Prospect. That's where he died. He lived there at least later in life at 10th and Prospect. So this was his neighborhood.
Gotcha. And if you want to stop sharing, I think you'll be able to answer all the rest of the questions, and then that way we can look at you. Okay, there are a lot of questions, but we're going to try to dive. No pun intended. We're going to try to dive into these. Okay. So I think you might have said a few of these things at the beginning. Let me see here. I'm still seeing your screen. Is there any way that you can?
I don't know how to.
So you just hit the
stop share. There we go.
Stop share. There you go.
There we go.
Perfect. Now we can see you. Cool. Okay. So let's talk a little bit. Give us another couple overview. I'm going to ask like a 5-part question. So I'm sorry. How we want to know, all of us watching, how deep is an average outhouse? I mean, I think we could guess, but if you could talk about some of the dangers of the whole excavation, what I want to know is how did the people create them to begin with so deep? And then let's do those 3 parts first, and then I'll go to the next part.
All right. Wood ones are usually, I mean, a barrel one's the depth of a barrel. So what's that, 4 feet deep, unless you put 2 in. The wood ones are usually about 10 to 15 feet deep. Stone ones, I don't know, probably less than 20. The brick outhouses, most of the ones in Covington are between 15 and 22 feet deep.
Wow.
I know that there have been ones like in Cincinnati that probably went 30 feet deep. So they go very deep. Well, how they were built was you dig the hole and you brick it up as you go up. So you dig the hole down maybe you shore it, or whatever. In fact, I don't know if they did. So you get somebody down there on a rope, and you're lowering bricks down, and they're laying up the bricks as they come up the hole.
That sounds so dangerous.
It was very dangerous. One of the newspaper articles I did not share was of two gentlemen who were digging a privy right next to another privy, and the gases from the first privy asphyxiated them.
Oh my
One of them lived and one of them didn't. So it was very dangerous work digging the outhouses. Excavating them. Long time ago, we used to go down in them. Was stupid. We were young and stupid. So, like you tie a rope around your waist and, climb down a ladder and you think you're safe. How we do it now is we dig down to maybe 4 or 5 feet. And then you dig around the outside, and that's with the giant holes that you saw the pictures of. So you have a track hoe and you dig around the outside, scoop that up onto the ground surface so you can look through it. And then you just keep doing it that way.
Wow.
It's the safest way to do it anymore,
Right.
because you can't, it's not safe to go down in them.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay, so I think I took care of those.
Okay, so next part, let's talk about the barrels for a minute.
Okay.
First of all, did they replace the barrels after a while? Do you know?
It looks like they just dug a new hole and
Just
put
a
in
new one.
another
Okay.
barrel. I think that's why that one has 5.
Five. Okay, that
2
makes
square
sense.
ones and 3 barrels, because they filled the one up and they just dug in a new one. I mean, the big brick and stone privies, they cleaned those out every once in a while. So there was actually a law passed in the 1880s that if your outhouse filled up to within 4 feet of the ground surface, you had to pay to get it dipped out.
Wow.
And those people were called honey dippers. And they came around at night, and you paid them, and they lowered children down in there with buckets, and they would just bucket it out into barrels on a wagon. My mother
Wow.
grew up, my mother was born 1921, and she remembers honey dippers
Yeah.
from
Wow.
the 1920s. And but they would definitely come around at night. But the barrels, you fill one up and you just dig another hole.
So speaking of the barrels, is there any chance that those were from local distilleries?
Oh, I'm sure they were made in Covington. Whether they might have come straight from the barrel manufacturer. Perhaps they were seconds. I mean, we had 2 Coopers living on the street, so they could very easily have brought one home that wasn't usable, or even an old one, like you said, from a distillery or someplace that wasn't using it anymore.
Wow.
It's okay to put it in the hole in the ground, I guess.
Right, right. Okay, so continuing on the line of distilleries, and I know we're getting short on time, I'm trying to be fast. Was there a distillery on the Licking off Robin Street? Do you happen to know?
I don't know.
Okay.
I only know where the people that in our neighborhood worked, and that was mostly the rolling mills and the steel mills.
Yeah. Okay. So I think I asked you this a while back. Oh, wait, hold on. We got one more question about the barrels. How big? Oh yeah, Mr. Zimbro said, how big were the barrels? And you said it's like a barrel, right? Like 4 foot.
Yeah, they're the regular, I don't know, what are those, 40, 50 gallon, whatever those are.
Yeah. And you said rather than replace them, they just like dig another one.
Yep.
Yeah.
Pretty much.
Okay. Okay. So last question that I have, well, actually 2 more maybe. So you found so much just what I would think of as like trash, in these. So I'm guessing there wasn't like, there's not like the weekly garbage truck that's like driving around and picking up trash, right? So, I mean, do people tend to use these things as kind of like a place to put garbage? Is that, or was it more of like an accident or just sort of happenstance that things would fall in occasionally?
Probably some of both, but there was trash pickup, because there are articles about people complaining that it wasn't getting picked up. So there were apparently barrels on the street that you could put your garbage in. And they were supposed to be picked up every week, but there were many articles about people complaining it wasn't getting picked up. But they were definitely using the outhouses to throw away garbage.
Right. Like
food garbage, animal bones, broken dishes, broken bottles. Now there's the accidental stuff, like a coin or things that fall in, right? You
sure.
don't mean to. And then there are the things you hide in the outhouse that you don't want anybody else to see, that we find 150 years later, like a person down on 2nd Street whose outhouse had probably 24 bottles of hair restorer. So this, like Rogaine or whatever, for the 1880s,
Yeah.
that was hidden in the outhouse. Or people who aren't supposed to, like say they're Baptist teetotalers or something, and you find alcohol bottles
Ah,
in the outhouse. So, there's that kind of stuff that they didn't necessarily want people to know, but they were definitely throwing trash.
okay.
And not even in their own outhouse. So we had a butcher shop on 11th Street, but he wasn't throwing his old bones in his own outhouse. He was throwing them in the one next door.
Oh, I bet that went over well.
Yeah.
um, so Gretchen Bart,
Look,
I don't know, Jeannine, if you and Gretchen Bartley know each other, but Gretchen has posted some very interesting just details about how outhouses were periodically cleaned by putting lye or quicklime into the privy to break things down. So thank you, Gretchen, for adding those
yes,
details.
we did find lime in some of the outhouses.
Cool.
That helps keep down the smell too. And they would also every once in a while they might put like a layer of broken brick or something like to seal layers in if they weren't going to clean it all the way.
Gotcha.
'Cause a lot of the outhouses you'll find when they've cleaned them, you'll find different patterns of, how they clean them. You can tell.
Gotcha.
Mhm.
So we're going to take this as our last question. David Klein would like to know, are these items that you found on display anywhere?
Some of them, I believe, are on display at Behringer-Crawford, maybe
Mhm.
down on the first floor that has some of the 19th century,
Yeah.
20th century. I would guess at least some of those artifacts are from one of the digs.
Mhm.
Most of the Hemingway artifacts, if there are any on display in the museum, came from the 2nd Street digs back in 1986.
Cool.
All the artifacts from 11th Street and 10th Street are curated at Behringer-Crawford.
Nice. And
So they all,
if anybody wants to kind of check those out, even though the museum is closed, there's actually a 360-degree tour available on the website, so you can check that out. Well, our time is up. We're just a couple minutes over, so thanks everybody for sticking with us. Jeannine, I always love your presentation, so thank you so much for doing this for us. Want to let everybody know that our schedule is going to change just a little bit over the next couple weeks, just because, holiday season and all. Behringer-Crawford Museum is actually going to have daily programming starting on Monday, December 14th through Thursday, December 24th. I believe it's all on Facebook, but you can check out Behringer-Crawford's website, bcmuseum.org, to find out more. We are going to have music, readings, art projects, all kinds of opportunities for people to explore the arts and culture of Northern Kentucky. And it'll be festive and fun, even if we can't all gather together. So History Hour will be back with you on December 30th. And we will be featuring Paul Tancati, and he will be talking about the 100th anniversary of women's suffrage. So join us then. Until then, I hope everyone enjoyed it, and we hope to see you back on December 30th, and we hope to see you at some of the other events in the next 2 weeks. So take care, everybody. Thank you. Good night.